So this one starts off with the wife of a rich man gets very sick. And she's like, I'm going to die. So I want to talk to my daughter and tell her some important lessons. So she brings the daughter there, and the daughter comes, and the mom is like, hey, you know what? Always be pious and good, and God will take care of you. And then she dies. And so the daughter was like super sad, and she went and visited the gravesite every single day, and it became winter. And then once spring came around, the dad remarried to the stepmother, and this stepmother had 2 daughters. And it says that they were beautiful and fair, but that their, I can't remember the exact words, basically like their hearts were like evil and dark. And they were basically the worst, the original Mean Girls. and they were like, you know, when they brought her home, they're like, ew, who are you? Like, is this stupid goose going to sit in the parlor with us? I don't think so. Which, you know, the one thing that you can say about them is they know how terrible geese are, and that's like the worst thing that you could call somebody.
It really is. That's a heinous insult.
It's like, what could be worse than being called a silly goose? So they take away all her nice clothes. They give her like an old gray dress and a pair of shoes made of wood. And so they, you know, do the typical mean stepsister thing where they are making her cook and clean and do all the chores. And then she doesn't even have a bed that she can sleep in at night. So she just has to sleep on the hearth with all these, you know, the ashes and the cinders. And so they start giving her the nickname of, in the English translation, it also says Cinderella. But in the German, the one bit of research I did, they call her Aschenputtel. Which, you know what, like Cinderella is actually kind of like a nice sounding name. So again, they're like keeping on brand and doing the good insults by calling her Aschenputtel, which just sounds terrible.
Aschenputtel.
One day the father's like, hey, I'm going to the fair. Y'all can't come, but do you want me to bring you any presents back? And so the stepsisters are like, oh, we want beautiful dresses and jewels. And they're like, he's like, all right, Cinderella, what do you want? And she's like, oh, I just want the first twig that brushes your hat on the way home. And he's like, okay, that's a really stupid present, but sure. So he goes to the fair and comes back, and he gives, you know, the stepsisters these beautiful dresses and gowns. And even though he offered to get her whatever she wanted, he brings her back this twig that had actually hit him in the head and knocked his hat off. And it was a twig of a hazel tree. And so she takes the tree and goes and plants it at her mother's grave. And so she just cries, and she cries so much that it waters the tree and causes the tree to start to grow. And she starts going back to cry there and pray there 3 times every single day.
That's
and so every
devotion.
time I know.
It's a very, very
like,
sad devotion.
I wake up, I eat breakfast, I pray and cry. I work all day, I work all morning, lunch, pray and cry. You get the pattern. But every time she goes to visit, there's this magical bird that will come to the tree that will grant her whatever wish that she asks for. But she doesn't ask for anything. So I don't know how she figured out that that's what it would do. Maybe she didn't know.
Yeah.
But there's this magic bird that she's not taking advantage of. So next thing you know, the king of this whole land is calling for like a big festival, a 3-day long festival. And the whole point of this is he's trying to get his like son, the prince, married. You know, so instead of like starting a Tinder profile or whatever for his son, he's like, we're going to have a big party. And at the end of this, there's going to be a wedding, you know, so we're going to have the 3 days thing. And then he's going to get married to whoever he chooses. So the stepsisters are like freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, we can become princesses. So they're getting all excited, and they make Cinderella get their dresses ready, comb their hair, brush their shoes, shine their buckles, all that stuff, which she does. But then Cinderella's like so sad. And she's like, I want to go to the party too. But the stepmother's like, no, I don't think so. But she like begs and begs and begs. And stepmother's like, all right, I'll tell you what. Here's this bowl of peas. I'm going to throw it into the ashes. And if you can pick up every one of these peas and lentils in 2 hours, then maybe you can come. So Cinderella's like, all right, well, let's see what I can do. She goes outside, does her special little bird call, and calls out to all the like birds around, the turtle doves and the pigeons and whatever. And so all these birds come, and they start helping her picking up the things. She's like, you know, put the good ones into this bowl, and the bad ones. There's like a little rhyme they say. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like, the good ones into the pot, the bad ones go into your crop. Which I'm thinking like they can just eat them, or I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's what she says.
Yeah.
And it has a nice little rhyme to it. So they come and they help her clean them all up. And she's like, in under an hour, she's got all these things done because the birds are helping. She's like, oh, stepmother, look, I've done what you asked. And the stepmother's like, no, actually what it meant was if you can get 2 bowls of these picked up in under 1 hour, then you can come. So she throws the 2 bowls into the ashes and the whole thing starts again. Cinderella calls the birds. They help pick up all the stuff. And then she goes back within like half an hour. She's like, look, stepmother, I did what you asked. And the stepmother's like, well, I didn't think you'd be able to do that. And actually, you don't have any dresses or clothes that you could wear, and you would just look ugly and disgusting and embarrass us. So you don't get to go. So they take off, the mother, the father, and the 2 stepsisters take off for the festival. And Cinderella's like, I've got an idea. This underutilized magic bird at my mother's mourning tree.
She's like, I've been waiting to ask this bird for a favor.
I've been waiting for the appropriate time, and now is it. So she goes to the tree and she says, again, another nice little rhyme, shiver and quiver, little tree, silver and gold, throw down to me. And instead of silver and gold, it produces like a beautiful dress made that was like gold and silver, and a pair of slippers that are made of silk with silver woven through them. And so she goes to the ball, and when she shows up, everyone's like, oh my gosh, who is this tall glass of water that just walked in the door?
This is the new it girl.
Anyway, so she's like the new hot thing in town, and they just think that she must be some foreign princess or something. And so the prince sees her and he's like, this is the one. So he dances with her all night, and whenever anyone comes to try to dance with either Cinderella or him, he's like, nope, she's my partner, we're dancing. And then Cinderella's like, you know what, I kind of want to go home, I've had enough of this party. And so the prince is like, hey, I'll walk you home, because he's like wants to see where she lives, like what family she belongs to, so she can like marry her or whatever. And she's like, nope. So she like jumps over the wall into a pigeon box, which I can only assume is like
a chicken coop.
A chicken coop or whatever. And so, just as that happened, the prince is like, okay, I'm going to sit here and wait for her to come out so I can follow her. And at the time...
Which, like, after you see, like, your date jump into, like, a chicken coop, basically, you're not like, oh, I'll just sit here and wait because I'm sure she's the one. That's what I look for in women.
Exactly. I was like, dude, get the hint. But while they're waiting, Cinderella's father comes up. He's like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, you know what? This seems exactly like something my daughter would do. So he's like, I wonder if it's her. So they get an axe and they break down the pigeon box or whatever. And she's not inside because she'd been able to sneak out the back and then run home. And she, returned the clothes to the tree. And when they got home, the mother, the father, and the stepsister, she was sleeping in her normal place in the hearth. And so they're like, okay. The next day, the second day of the festival, they go. Same sort of thing happens. As soon as they're gone, she goes to the tree, does her little rhyme, shiver and quiver, little tree, silver and gold, throw down to me. And this time her dress is like even more amazing than it was before. And she goes there with the prince. She dances all night. And then the time comes. He's like, oh, I want to walk you home. And she's like, nah.
Nah.
So she runs and she climbs up into a pear tree. And it says, literally, she clambered nimbly between the branches like a squirrel.
And I'm like, she's in a dress. Like, she's in a super nice dress. And she's just, like, at a really nice party. And he's like, hey, can I walk you home? And she's like, nope. And, like, scurries up the tree. It makes me think of, like, in Nacho Libre, like the lady who like climbs into the tunnels like at the party and just like scurries into the tunnels in the wall.
Exactly. And so the prince is like, she was so nimble and quick that he couldn't see where in the tree she went. And then, Cinderella's father was watching this and he was like, you know what, this is really starting to seem like something that my daughter would do. So he gets an axe and chops the tree down. But she'd already climbed out the backside of the tree before they did that and gotten home, returned her dress, was asleep on the hearth when everyone else got there. So the third day, she goes to the party again, similar situation, dancing all night. And like the prince has wisened up to the fact that she's going to just bounce as soon as she wants to. So he's hatched a little plan and covered the staircase in pitch. So he's like, oh yeah, if you want to go, just go down the staircase. So she runs away. And because the staircase is covered in pitch, it leaves her slipper behind. And this time I didn't mention, but it was like golden. It was a golden slipper.
Golden slipper. It's stuck in the pitch. She gets home.
Yeah. So, and the same thing. So she gets home, but this time without her slipper. And again, the dad was like thinking, Cinderella's dad was like, this might be.
I'm just glad that like this time she wasn't like, oh, quick, into the holes in the ground. Like, then she quickly burrowed away like a gopher.
It's like, because that was the next thing. She's like gone with the chickens, gone like a squirrel. Gopher was the next place to go. So the next morning, I guess, I don't know why this happened, but the prince goes to Cinderella's dad and was like, hey, no one's going to be my wife except for the person that can fit this golden slipper. And so the dad and everyone in the house is like really happy, especially the two stepsisters are like, oh, my foot is going to fit in that slipper. And so the mother and the older sister go into the bedroom to try on the slipper and they're like trying to shove it in there. And it's like her foot is too big. So the mom's like, she's like, cut off, your toe's too big. You got to cut off your toe so that it can fit in the slipper. So they cut off her toe, puts in the slipper, and the prince is like, oh, okay, it fits. I guess you're going to be my wife. So he gets her in his carriage and they start riding away. And then they drive past this tree, not just any tree, the hazel tree that Cinderella had planted. And there's these two birds sitting in it. And they're like, their rhyme, it differs in the different versions I read, but in one they're like, rook-de-goo, rook-de-goo. There's blood in the shoe. The shoe is too tight. This bride is not right. So these little pigeons like snitch out on the older stepsister and he looks down and he's like, oh my gosh, what the heck? You're bleeding all over the place. And then finds out that she cut her toe off. They take her back. They're like, well, might be the other sister. So they take the younger sister into the room. She's putting it in. Her toes fit in fine, but then her heel is just like too big. So the mom's like, you just cut off a piece of your heel. It doesn't matter. Like, you'll get away with it for some reason, even though
it didn't work the first time.
Last time. So they, cut off a piece of her heel, put it in, and the prince is like, oh, I guess the shoe fits. All right, hop in my carriage and away we go. We'll go get married. Again, the birds, rook-de-goo, blood in the shoe. She's not the right for you, or whatever they say. And he's like, oh, dang, what? You're bleeding all over the slipper too. He'd take you back to your dad's house. And he's like, don't you have any other daughters? And the guy's like, no, there's only like a deformed little Aschenputtel from my first wife. It's like, she can't be it. And he's like, well, you know what? And the mom's like, no, she's so dirty. We can't show her around. So embarrassing. The prince insisted. So they called her out. But first she like washes her hands, washes her face.
And hopefully he washes the shoe.
And hopefully washes, the blood-stained shoe.
It'll be easier to get on now because it's nice and slippery.
Slippery, yeah. So she goes and she sits on a stool. She puts her foot in, and it fits perfectly. And suddenly, when the prince looks up from her feet, because he's just been staring at everyone's feet this whole time, apparently, he recognizes the beautiful face of the woman that he's been dancing with every night. So he takes her off to be married. And so at the wedding... Oh, yeah, this little fact. When they drive past with Cinderella, the two little snitched pigeons cry out, rook-de-goo, no blood in the shoe. The shoe is not tight. This bride is right. And so those pigeons go and they land on Cinderella's shoulders, and they, one on the left shoulder, one on the right shoulder, and they ride off together. And then so at the wedding... those birds are on her shoulders and the stepsisters are like trying to curry favor with Cinderella now that she's going to be like a princess. And so they're escorting her into the wedding. But these birds who like do not like the stepsisters, they each pluck out an eye from each stepsister, the eye that's closest to them.
Yeah.
So the sisters sit through this whole wedding ceremony missing an eye. And then when they're walking out, they decide, you know what? These birds pecked our eyes out the last time. Let's switch sides so that, that bird had a problem with you. This bird had a problem with me. We'll just switch sides. And so as they're walking out, their good eyes are closest to the birds and the birds pick those eyes out. And so, both stepsisters left completely eyeless.
Blinded,
and blinded. And the story ends with these words, and thus for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness as long as they lived. The end.
Like, yay. And now the children can sleep well at night.
It's like, turns out the story wasn't about Cinderella at all. It's about don't be a mean girl like the stepsisters.